Welcome to the VMware and AWS Update Show, the June 2023 edition. On the Update Show, we bring you up to speed with new releases and features on everything VMware and AWS related. We'll cover jointly engineered services such as VMware Cloud and AWS, which is the fastest and lowest risk path to get your VMware workloads into the AWS cloud. And we'll be covering additional AWS and VMware services which enhance the VMware Cloud experience, such as VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery, VMware HCX, AWS Backup and Amazon FSx. Plus, we'll let you know about any recently released blog articles, reference architectures and customer case studies. Each show we select one or two items from the list of updates, and with our guests we dive into those items a little deeper. I'm Chris Porter and I'm delighted to be joined by our guest co-host for this month's show, Natasha Marinakis.
Thanks Chris, it's great to be here today.
Wonderful to have you on the show, Natasha. So first duty as our co-host, do you want to tell us what we have coming up this month?
Sure. On the agenda for today's show, we have our regular round of updates from the world of VMware and AWS. Then this month we'll dive deep into some recent enhancements to the VMware Site Recovery service with Greg Vinton from AWS.
Excellent. Let's get started. For this month, we have updates covering a number of different services, and as ever, let's start with VMware Cloud on AWS. As mentioned in last month's show, with the latest VMware Cloud on AWS release, version 1.22, there were some enhancements made to Elastic DRS. This month, we've made those enhancements now available to all VMware Cloud on AWS customers via the new Elasticity tab. We've had some compliance news in the last month, with VMware Cloud on AWS achieving PCI compliance in the remaining regions, which means all VMware Cloud on AWS regions, except for GovCloud, are now PCI compliant, and we've also achieved Germany's C5 certification. The rollout of our latest instance type, I4I, continues, with availability now in Bahrain, Cape Town, Milan, Mumbai, Osaka and Stockholm. And we see a further update to the VMC Sizer version 5.3.1, which has added a new host-based sizer capability. This allows for reverse sizing, where you can see what available capacity there is depending on how many hosts you have in a cluster. For VMware services, VMware Site Recovery has had some exciting updates, which we'll dive into later in the show. In summary, the limit for replication, also known as Recovery Point Objective or RPO, has been reduced down to 1 minute from 5 minutes. And we've seen Bahrain added as a new region for VMware Site Recovery, which brings the regions VMware Site Recovery is available in to 23. Plus, support has been added for new replication topologies that use VMware Cloud on AWS Outpost. VMware Cloud Director Service has seen some minor updates this month, with improvements to the SDDC association workflow, additional security capabilities to allow IP restrictions to CDS instances, enhancements to email notifications, and proxy enhancements for networks that don't permit outbound connections. Lastly, for service updates, we've seen a new release for VMware Converter version 6.4. VMware Converter is a great tool if you have physical servers you wish to migrate to VMware Cloud and AWS, or if you have servers that you're migrating from environments where you can't install common migration tools such as HCX. Version 6.4 adds lots of new support for hardware devices such as NVMe disk controllers and Power Virtual SCSI disk controllers. It adds support for vCenter in ESXi version 8 and adds conversion support for Amazon EC2 instances. That means that with VMware Converter, you can now migrate Amazon EC2 instances into VMware Cloud on AWS. Finally, to wrap up the updates this month, we have a new blog article covering simplifying operations for VMware workloads using AWS Backup and VMware Cloud on AWS. As ever, you'll find links and more info regarding all of those updates in the description below the video. This month we've seen enhancements to VMware Site Recovery, and to take us through those updates we're joined by Greg Vinton. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Hey Chris, hey Natasha, excited to be on the show for the first time and excited to share some updates for VMware Site Recovery.
Excellent. So to get us started, can you give us an overview of VMware Site Recovery?
Yeah, sure. So VM Site Recovery, first of all, is a cloud-based disaster recovery service. So what that means for customers is it gives them a really simple way to provide DR capabilities for workloads that they're running both on-premise and also in VMware Cloud on AWS. Because it also uses VMware Cloud on AWS as the disaster recovery site, this has a bunch of benefits for customers as well. The real key benefit, though, for a customer is that they don't have to have an on-premise data center up and running all the time that they have to manage and have investments into for a disaster recovery site. They can leverage VMware Cloud on AWS for the recovery site and scale this up and down based on their requirements. It's very easy to build out your recovery plans based on your recovery point objectives or RPOs, and also build plans out on your recovery time objectives or RTOs. The main part for customers that really resonates with them, though, is the ability to easily test their disaster recovery plans. We find with customers a lot of the time that they have a disaster recovery plan in place, but it's so hard to test that they negate testing it. So with VMware Site Recovery, it's very easy to test these plans. And then when you have a DR event, very easy to enable them as well. So these are probably the key benefits that resonate with a lot of our customers.
Thanks for that, Greg. Can you give us an example of how our customers have been using VMware Site Recovery?
The key use case that we see most of the time is that disaster recovery use case. But there's a number of different architectures that we see customers use VMware Site Recovery with their production sites. The first one is, I guess, a simple design. They have a primary data center that's running either on-premise or in VMware Cloud on AWS, and they're protecting that with VMware Site Recovery. The second one that we see is what we call a fan-in topology. And so they'll have multiple sites, whether that's multiple on-premise data centers or multiple VMware Cloud on AWS production sites, or a combination of both, protecting those into different AWS regions using VMware Site Recovery. We also actually see customers use VMware Site Recovery to migrate their workloads from on-premise into VMware Cloud on AWS. So there's a number of use cases around that as well.
Excellent. And in the last month, we've seen some exciting enhancements to VMware Site Recovery. Can you tell us a little more about those changes?
Yeah, sure. So there's always exciting news when it comes to VMware Cloud on AWS, but there has been some really good updates in the last month for VMware Site Recovery specifically. The first one is the lowering of the recovery point objective. So this used to sit at a minimum of 5 minutes RPO. That's now down to 1 minute. So for customers that are really trying to get almost to what we call synchronous replication or very low RPO, this is a great offering. For customers that are looking at asynchronous or lower than 1 minute RPO, we'll typically look at something like a VMware Stretch cluster for them as well. There's been some other enhancements through auto scaling and load balancing. So when we're protecting workloads into the recovery site, they actually get load balanced across the different hosts in VMware Cloud on AWS. So when you do have a recovery or you're testing your plans, those workloads are already balanced across the disaster recovery site. The next one is the ability to auto scale out that recovery site based on the required resources. So when you're protecting your production sites or your protected sites into your recovery site using VMware Site Recovery, the recovery site can automatically scale up to handle those protected workloads as they scale as well. We've had some recent expansions to different AWS regions that are supported with VMware Site Recovery. The latest one is the Bahrain region, and that now takes us up to 23 regions globally that are supported for VMware Site Recovery, which is super exciting. The final one is just around the new supported topologies. So for customers that have a VMware Cloud on AWS Outposts deployment in their on-premise data centers, they can now protect workloads between Outposts environment using VMware Site Recovery. And the final one is the topology around protecting VMware Cloud on AWS workloads using VMware Site Recovery to a VMware Cloud on AWS Outposts environment. So they're the main updates for this month, and I'm sure there's going to be more in the next month as well.
Greg, how do customers get started with VMware Site Recovery?
For customers that are leveraging VMware Cloud on AWS today, it's very easy because it's a cloud service. You can go and activate VMware Site Recovery in your environment today, and you're up and running very quickly. It will also provide you with the template to deploy the on-premise appliance. Once you've done that, you can start creating what we call protection groups and recovery plans to start protecting your workloads. So very, very easy to get up and running.
Great, thanks for your time, Greg, and thanks for diving deep on those updates. And that about wraps up our update around VMware Site Recovery. Thank you for your time, Greg.
Thanks, team. Appreciate it. I'll see you soon.
That wraps up another episode of the Update Show. Thank you ever so much for joining us. To get more information on anything we've covered today, Natasha, where should viewers go?
You can find more information on the AWS website. Just search for VMware, and we'll have information on all updates covered in this show in the description below.
There'll also be a link in that description that will allow you to get in contact with a representative from AWS. Thanks to Natasha for joining me as a co-host. I hope it's been a fun experience. And over to you to close out today's show.
Thanks, Chris. It's been wonderful to take part in the Update Show, and thanks for having me. And thank you to our viewers at home for tuning in.
Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.